Way, people were here before me because I'm 1 minute late. Amazing. Thanks for popping in. I'm still having my ongoing fight with Streamlabs to get them to fix the UX. I sent them a proper QA video today. Welcome. Today we are looking at some dungeon crawling games. They're not both kind of the same genre of game, but they both had a dungeon crawling theme, so I've put them together. And we've got Iterum, which you might have seen on the channel before. That's coming from one of our Patreon supporters. And that's kind of further along. I mean, I think it's due for release this year, kind of a trad roguelike. Trad roguelike with an interesting structure, because it's very much like a series of dungeons presented like a challenge tower. So that's a really neat kind of structure to do for a smaller indie game, because, you know, a lot of trad roguelikes have the habit of like generating a whole world and then it's a sandbox, which is great and it's good that those exist, but it's not like a manageable project for most people to make. So I like this game. I had a good time with it before. The majority of the stream is probably going to be me replaying Ad Iterum, seeing what's changed. My main beef with it before was you kind of want to zoom the camera in and out to get more of the context of the dungeon, and some of the visual effects were like messing with that quite a bit when I played it before. But I like this game. I'm happy to be playing it again. And I've also scheduled something called Synergy Abyss, which was in the backlog. So Ad Iterum is coming from one of our patrons, from patreon.com/indie game clinic, and then this game came into the public submission thing on indiegameclinic.com, and the dev of this basically they made it for a game jam, and they just sort of like thinking about, should they spend more time on it, should they make it into a bigger game. So I'm not going to read the whole page, but we'll give this one a little play first for sort of 20-30 minutes, and then I'll switch over to Ad Iterum and give it, you know, a few runs, however many runs I can do in an hour or whatever. Ideally one big run, because I don't die. That would be great, but we'll see. And yeah, thanks for joining today. If it's your first time here, welcome. This is a channel where I play games, talk about what works in them for me, what doesn't work for me. Most of the time it's games that haven't been released yet. Full screen it. Some nice kind of spooky chip tunes coming in. Somewhat disconcerting chip tunes. Is there a way I can full screen it? I'm going to download it so that we get the full screen version. I like these kind of submissions where it's someone's jam game and they're kind of like thinking, what would I do to make this into a bigger game? Because that's an interesting set of things to think about when you've actually got the game in front of you. You know, when I first started this channel, I used to do little bits of one-off consulting work on Fiverr, where people could send me like a prototype or a game design document or whatever. And I stopped looking at people's game design documents after a while, stopped doing that, because it's like the idea for your game isn't really meaningful unless I can see what you can do. And so looking at someone's like 2 days of work from a game jam or 1 month of work from a game jam, you can see loads of potential in what they can do. You can see what that developer's good at. You can go, oh yeah, you're strong at this, so do more of this. Whereas when it's just someone writing down their idea as a game design document and you don't have the context, you don't have like the studio context of who that person is and what they can do, then you can't really judge the thing very well. Is it the Severance theme? That's funny. See, I don't have Apple TV. I'm gonna do new game. What am I pressing to make it advanced? Because enter and space don't do anything. Can I use the gamepad? Yeah, I can. Are we just gonna get Severance as a first-person dungeon crawler? Is that what we're doing here? Amazing. You wake. Is that wake or what? You wake in a stupor, slumped in the corner of a well-lit hallway. art imitating life. I think that's what they call it. Your memory feels hazy and you're not quite sure how you got there. There is some vague recollection of accepting a fishy-sounding job offer, but it appears something has gone terribly awry. We're using B for next on the gamepad, which feels incredibly unintuitive. Maybe that's the thing where you're kind of like copying a Switch game or copying a Japanese console game, but B is nearly always back in console menus. You slowly stand up and try to take a look around to get your bearings. I mean, the idea of using... there's something very funny about using a corporate office as a dungeon anyway, because... like, one of the reasons we use dungeons and spaceships and stuff like that in games is because they're not real, they're sort of half real. We can make them into, like, abstract things that suit the needs of the level design, right? And real-world settings often have a problem that if you make a building based on a real building, it's not good level design for whatever reason. That's also why post-apocalyptic settings are good, because you can take a building and you can, like, smash half of it down or fill half of it with plants, and you can do all of these things that, like, meet the level design needs of the game that you can't do if it's just, like, a real place. But the kind of funny thing about having a corporate dungeon crawler is it's the kind of backrooms thing, right? We can take the iconography of it being a corporate office and just make a slightly surreal, not really needing to make sense kind of place. Right, there's something a bit weird here where when we're in this position with the door to our left, I think this needs to bisect this wall a little bit, because it still looks like it's a space ahead of us. It kind of needs to... this line of the door needs to just be hidden by the edge of the frame. So if I turn left, I'm in front of the door. Yeah, don't use the Nintendo controller patterning for games that people are playing on a PC, because they're playing on a PC, not on a Nintendo system. I always found myself remapping things on the Switch for that reason. And it's weird, because normally if you're in a left to right language, you would associate the right hand button with going next. But B or circle has been back on every Xbox or PlayStation game for like 20 years, so... yeah, I don't know, the scan lines, I think maybe it's not meant to be played on full screen, so if I do it like that, I mean, what I can do is, I can just enlarge the capture so that you get the full game. And we don't get broken scan lines, there we go. That should do it. An enemy blocks the way. Let's find out what they are. You knew something about this job was off, but this takes the cake. It's a demon. The creature speaks up. Hey you ain't supposed to be out there. The new onboarding progress should, never mind. I'll simply take care of you myself, The imp lackey blocks the way. Okay, what are we doing? What are we doing to fight you? Press the upcoming bottom combo to increase your defense. Okay, it just gives us a time window to press that in. Bring the music down a little bit, there you go. Okay, so we've got like as Simon says, somewhere deep within your mind you recall a sensation, an intense desire to absolutely clobber this corporate lackey. Your body moves before your mind gives you permission. You swing wildly at the enemy. Press A at the right time in the upcoming window to land a hit. I think if this was going to be a bigger game, I think you could think a little bit about how to stylize like story and flavor text versus instructional text. You know, so when we get this bit and it's giving us tutorial, I'd maybe like flip the coloration of the menu so that it's like a green menu with white text or something like that, dark green with white on it. Some sort of change so that players can differentiate when they're being told a story and being given theme versus like, you should pay attention to this now because we're giving you vital game instructions. It just saves people a lot of hassle of like missing one key step because they're reading too fast. Oh, it says press A, but it was mapped to B. Strange. The creature reels from your attack. Grr, alright. That's it, buddy. Once I'm done with you, I'm reporting you directly to HR. When they get their hands on you, you're really going to regret it. The enemy is attacking. Partial hit. Okay. Now we've got some options. I mean, this is just in the square as well, so I can make this even bigger, can't I? Let's do that. It's definitely the sort of situation where, like, this kind of gameplay is a bit of an immediate turn-off for me because we're not making interesting decisions, we're just reacting. And reacting is usually more interesting if there's a rich context, right? That's how action games work. You have, like, a space you're moving around in and stuff, and that's what makes reaction interesting, whereas this very narrow window of just do this thing is not exciting. But I am more willing to put up with that in a game that is thematically interesting, and this kind of feels thematically interesting. We're doing like Severance meets Shin Megami Tensei kind of thing. I don't know why you keep asking that, Yellow Star. You asked that the other day. What is the introduction video that you're talking about? Are you talking about the Patreon ad? The Patreon ad runs automatically on some streams if you enter them before the stream is ready. I don't know what you mean by an introduction video. Yeah, I think it is a GBA emulator. If I've deleted something, it's because I don't want it on here. But you haven't really given me any reason why you even care about that. And you've come in the chat twice and said, why did you delete this? Which, first off, is coming from someone I don't know and don't have any context for, just sounds accusatory. Why did you do this? Because I wanted to, because I didn't want it there. But I also don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you mean by the introductory video. If you mean the Patreon ad that runs at the start of streams, sometimes that's there and sometimes that's not. It depends on the setting and whether I've had time to set it. There's like a very, very old video from 2 years ago where I talked about what the channel was, but it was old and out of date, so I probably took it down, just like I took other things that were older and out of date that I felt I didn't like anymore or didn't represent what I wanted the channel to be or the quality of what I wanted to do. So, I mean, flat out telling me to re-upload stuff when I've clearly taken it down for a reason is like, I don't know. Be conscious of the fact that people do things for reasons and don't just tell them, hey, undo that thing you did because I want it undone. It sounds incredibly entitled and I don't know who you are or why you're even wanting me to do that. They take a quick look at it again before speaking up. Hey, close enough. I might even get my own desk for bringing you in. The gremlin intern blocks the way. Okay. What's going to be different about the different combat encounters? Let's find out. You throw an uppercut at the enemy. Boop. Yeah, it says A when I put B in and it says B when I put A in. So I need to invert the things in my head. Patrick says, do you look at the dungeon itself or do you look at the mini-map? I don't know. I used to play a lot of these when I was a kid on the Amiga, and I think I had one on the NES as well, actually. I used to play a lot of these. I think you mainly look at the mini-map, but they sort of serve two different functions, don't they? So you do need them at the same time. Trying to mentally rotate A into B and B into C on my controller is not fun. What do I think about diegetic maps? Where's the chat box gone? Sorry, I didn't have the chat box shown on the actual stream screen. Naughty. Funky Wizard in the chat said, what do you think about diegetic maps, those you actually open inside the game to look at? I think most of these things, it's a matter of appropriateness. You will meet people that just say they flat out don't like a thing, right? I always hate weapon degradation, or I always hate this thing. It's like, it's all appropriateness in context, you know? Obviously, people have things that they never like in a particular thing. Like, oh, I hate olives, so I don't want olives on a pizza, and I don't want olives on pasta or whatever. But games are a bunch of stuff that all interlocks to make an experience. So I don't have strong feelings about different types of maps. It just depends on what's appropriate. It is interesting though, when you've always got a map available, you do end up using it, and it's like that kind of phenomena when you use a sat nav in the real world and then you never learn the route because you're not really navigating using a map, you're just looking at the sat nav. So it is a little bit like that, but I think it comes down to what skill you're trying to test as well. If we took that mini-map away in this game and we were like, oh, you can access the mini-map under certain conditions, then we would be turning navigation into a skill that the game is... Is it the Twitch chat I'm reading? It's both of them, they're mixed. Although everyone is coming in from YouTube at the moment. I have both of the chats up. But the only person I've seen posting Twitch this morning has been Brainoid. Brainoid, all alone. So yeah, if you wanted navigating the thing to be one of the skills the game is about, then you could take the mini-map away and make it available less often. I think if it was available all the time but you had to go into the inventory or press a button, that would just be like an annoying inconvenience. But if you could make it something that... Keep pressing at the wrong time. Yeah, exactly. What Gabriel said, it adds friction. So it's like, then what is the purpose of that friction? Because if the friction was much bigger, so it was like, oh, there are places in the level where you can see a map, and then you can't see it the rest of the time. So when you go to that place in the level, you can get a little bit of the level around you, and you can like either memorize it or draw your own map. Then that's maybe interesting, because that's like introducing a particular new type of challenge to the game. Whereas just hiding the map so that you have to press a button to retrieve it is like... Again, it's all about context. In a game that's like The Forest or something like that, that's like an immersive 3D game that is based on like survivalism and trying to give you a feeling of like genuinely being in a place, that might be better. That might be a better choice. because it adds to that. But in most cases, it's adding a piece of friction that is not going to make the game more interesting in any particular way, you know? The enemy designs are pretty great. Hey, are you the one making trouble down here? We're doing this for your own good. The bottom line demands it. If you can't trust the process, then prepare to be taken offline. The HR fiend blocks the way. I think we've got a lot of emphasis on these kind of Pokemon-style battles, which, I don't know, when I think back to stuff like Eye of the Beholder, and I think it was called Dungeon... I think it was just called Dungeon Master, the first one of these I ever played. And the more recent ones like Grimrock and stuff. There's a lot of emphasis on environmental puzzles and like finding the thing on the wall that you press to open this other thing, and then you've only got like a certain amount of time or steps to get back to that door that's opened in the wall. I can't see any of that in here yet. And the combat system is fine. It's like functional. Obviously, showing B on the screen and that corresponding to A on someone's controller is not good. But it's functional and it's okay as a small part of a game. I wouldn't want to play a game where like 40% of it was that combat system, because it's like a rhythm game. It's just, you know, I've talked about this before. Rhythm games, a lot of fishing mini games, it just narrows down the space of what the player is doing to one specific reaction where you have to do one thing at a time. Lots of people are quite tolerant of that. Lots of people hate it, and you just need to decide whether, you know, can you do the exact thing the game wants you to do at this moment, and there's only one way of doing it, is interesting. An interesting thing to ask an adult to do hundreds of times while they play your game for multiple hours. And most people will say, no, it's not. Some people will tolerate it, but again, you're getting into niches within niches there. So I would think about that. I think the theming of this is cool. I think everything about the art and the storytelling in this kind of tells me, yeah, maybe that would be worth trying to make into a bigger project. But I think you would need to go away and play some more dungeon crawlers and look at how they handle things like environmental puzzles and stuff like that. Because one thing is, if you don't do that, you're going to have a boring game, because like Shin Megami Tensei combat done through Simon Says QuickTime events is not interesting enough in its own right. But also, it's not making as good a use of the theme and the setting as it could be. Because if we were like going up to computers and interacting with them, or going up to like printers and scanners and other types of office equipment, or like, you know, maybe there's some acid on the floor that hurts us when we walk through it, and we can take that shortcut and walk through the acid, or we can find the janitor's closet and get the mop and mop up the acid. Those kind of things. Things that are like little environmental things that would make use of the fact that it's in an office. Because the idea of it being an office and there being these like corporate demons and stuff is like, yeah, that's a funny idea. We see it, it's presented well in the art. It's not really reflected in the mechanics from what I saw so far. It's really just a standard, well, not really a standard dungeon crawler because it doesn't have the puzzles, but it's you know, presented as a retro dungeon crawler, and then the random battles. I don't know who played the old Sega Shining, the whatever games. There was one of them that was like this. So the Shining games were like the Sega equivalent of Final Fantasy, where but what they did was like most of the games in this series were in a different format. You know, like one would be a top-down action game like Chrono Trigger, Shining Force, this kind of thing. Shining Force is like that. And then, is it Shining the Holy Ark? Shining in the Darkness is a dungeon crawler like this. It kind of reminds me of that, because Shining in the Darkness, you had like a dungeon crawler, and then you went into this kind of turn-based, you know, taking turns to do an attack or a spell or whatever type combat. It can work, but I really think the focus on what you can do with the environment because of the theme would be a much better use of the theme than just using it as a very easily replaceable thing that could be a fantasy or sci-fi dungeon crawler, you know. Patrick, I think you're right. Yeah, think about TTRPG design, game mastering experience here. Yeah. You know, I would almost like, so that's a good reference point actually. So when I'm running a TTRPG campaign, one of the things I do is as I play with a group of players, I work out what their characters are supposed to be good at, right? So if we've got a healer and a barbarian, like I work out what stats wise their characters are good at, and then I also work out what the players seem to want to do. And then I also work out what their weak points are. And I plan, after I've run a few sessions with the group, whether we're playing D&D or Delta Green or whatever it is, some sort of homebrew thing, I work out all of the session based on that. So I pick each of the players, I go, what is their character good at? What do they seem to enjoy doing? And what are they weak at? What are they not good at? So I try and give them... I build all of the content around providing everyone with a time to shine and something that is gonna expose a weakness that they have. Like they've got no healer, or they've got no character that can read a different language, or whatever it is. They've got no character that knows about history, whatever it is. And I try and use all of those things to guide what I make, because that is the easiest way to get like a great kind of return on investment for my time for creating the content, whether it's the combat encounters or puzzles or whatever. And I think you can do that in this context. You can say, okay, we're on level 1 of the quote-unquote dungeon. We're going to have some story. We're going to have some combat. You've already got those elements, okay? You're doing stuff with those elements. It kind of works. The dialogue feels right. The little bits of narrative, they're not too long-winded. They're about right for like a Game Boy style game. But then we're not using the theme of searching around a creepy office. And to be fair, I didn't play for very long. Maybe that comes in later. But your game is going to show people what it is in the first 20 minutes. And if this game does have those environmental puzzles, it needs to show them earlier on so people know that we're not just doing a kind of like Shin Megami Tensei Challenge Tower disguised as a narrative game, because that's kind of what it feels like, because the emphasis is so much on onboarding you into the combat, which isn't like super interesting in its own right. So I would like kind of start with just a list of like, what do people want to do in this environment, or what do people expect from this environment, and what the other skills I could test. Like, what's the thing that players are going to be rewarded by for like exploring the whole level and not just rushing through the golden path each time? All of those kind of things, and then use them to design the rest of the content. But I do think this has legs. It's definitely the sort of project where you look at it and go, oh yeah, that person can make games, which is a good place to start, at least. Yeah, it's the Severance theme, or so I'm told. I keep missing good shows because I don't have Apple TV. Yeah, I think I mean, this is like a general thing that everyone can think about. When you make a game, and when you're in that stage where you've made a jam game, or you've made like a prototype, and now you're thinking, what would the bigger version of this game be, right? So you're trying to work out what you would need to do to take that game and make enough content for it and make enough variation in it for it to be like a game that someone would be happy to give you $5 for, right? Lots of us in that situation. I was working on our current game for like 6 months before we got past that point, or 9 months even before. That's me. One of the things you can do is there's like 2 types of content in your game. Well, I would say it sits on a scale between these 2 things. And one of those extremes is like reusable things that show up all the time. So they're like the tools in the game, like in the game world, that the player can find that they reuse over and over again, and they're like part of the the signature of the game, like the respawn points in BioShock, or the recycling machine in Prey. I'm going to use a load of ImSim examples here. There are these like reusable components of gameplay that are things in the environment. And in that last game, like a door is one of those, right? It's not a very exciting one of those, but it is one of those. You have these like reusable parts that you say, okay, I can build this thing and then I can reuse it again in these different levels, and maybe I have slight variations on how it's used, but it's a reusable part. And then you also have like one-off set piece things like a boss or like a puzzle that only occurs once and is really unique. And you need to sort of work out what the balance of those things in your game is, because if you don't have anything that's unique, it might be boring. And if you don't have anything that's reused, then the game might be very difficult to learn, right? Talked about this. There's a video essay on the channel about repetition and variation that talks about this. There's not like a hard and fast rule that every game should have 30% of this and 70% of this. But when you're in that stage, like that developer is in, and you're going, I've got this small game, how do I make the bigger version of the game? Try and think of things in those terms as well. So you've got a type of content that your game needs, like enemies, for example. Okay, so we've got enemies as a category of content. What percentage of that category should be things we see over and over again? And what percentage of that category should be things that are unique all the time? So, and that's kind of a question that loops back into the genre and the subgenre of the game, because if it's a grinding game, you can have lots of enemies that are the same every time, but you still want to have unique enemies. And that's kind of why bosses exist in games, right? We have bosses because we're either testing the player's accumulation of actual skill up to that point, or we're testing the player's grinding, right? Because grinding systems like JRPGs have, or how XP works in online games like Helldivers and Fortnite, they don't really test your skill. They test your kind of commitment to the thing, which is why they're so heavily used in online games as service games, because they don't want to reward the player who's the best. They want to reward the player who plays the most. And that might sound like a negative thing, but it's not. It's just a different type of game. And then there are games in the middle, like action RPGs like Dark Souls, where it's a little bit of both. A boss is testing how good you are at the action mechanics and how leveled up your character is. So when you get to that content category of enemies and thinking about like what percentage are reusable versus like how many bosses do I need, it's going to depend on those sorts of things. Because if your game is mostly about grinding, then you're going to need more variety in like the basic enemies, because you're going to be playing it a long time, right? So those are the things I would think about, because Frederick Len gave a good example in Portal, right? Very different sort of game, puzzle game. You've got the test chambers, and Portal is designed around this principle, right? Because the way Portal works, and let's get just for the people who don't know about Portal or have only seen it flash up in a video essay or something. So the whole kind of narrative and environment design of Portal is built to sustain this. So, you are put into these test chambers where you are using this portal gun, which lets you go from one portal to another. And they're all clean and geometric. And that, solves a lot of problems because it makes it easier to read and understand. But then when you get outside of that and you start to find that some of these rooms are a little bit broken, or we can like go behind the scenes or whatever, and things are broken and run down and everything. That's Portal 2 probably, I'm not sure. Then you get these story moments where it's a deviation from the thing, right? So we can think of that ratio again of like, the game is 80% a kit of these reusable elements that allow us to just make pure gameplay, pure puzzles. And then we've got moments where that breaks down and it becomes a bit more rough and organic. And we've got like particular rooms with bits of destruction that we wouldn't see in any other room, or we wouldn't think we've seen in any other room. And that again is about this like this ratio of different types of content. And any game, if you want to make a game that's like of a reasonable size that people are happy to play, then these kind of questions about efficiency and how you build different types of content are kind of important to think about. I'm just going to look back through the chat for a minute and then we'll get the next game up. Yeah, I don't know how your prototype could be too big for itch. Make a smaller one. I mean, I think some of that, Philippe, that some of that comes back to like what is a prototype. And at the risk of repeating myself ad nauseum, what is a prototype in science or in R&D for any other type of product? It is not version 0.1 of something we've already decided we're going to make, right? So when you talk about something you're making and you talk about it as a prototype, what a prototype is a test object for a theory about something. So if you were building cars for a car company, your prototype would be to test certain theories about what is a good car or what is a different type of car that people might like or whatever. It's not I've decided to make this car in 3 years time and here's the first version of it. Right? That's the difference. So when you're thinking about your projects and you're talking about them as a prototype, remember it's not a prototype unless it's there to test something. And if you've got this issue where your game is too big to put it on itch, then it can't function as a prototype because you need people to play it in order for you to be testing something with it. Otherwise, you're just making something, you're just tinkering, which is fine. It's fine to tinker. But if we think about what prototyping means as part of a design process, it is you have some theories about what would be fun, and you test them by building a thing. And often that thing is not even the thing that ends up being the game. You know, a lot of people will advise you to throw away all of the prototype code and restart it, which is not always feasible for us. You know, here's Kojima prototyping. I love these pictures, so good. Kojima prototyping Metal Gear Solid level elements with Lego. That's prototyping right there, because you're testing the idea. Whereas like building version 0.01 of something that you've already committed to building, that's not a prototype. That's just a game you've already decided to make. Whereas a prototype would be answering questions that help you decide whether to make that game or to answer questions about a game you're already making. So if the issue is that you can't put it online, you either need to make it smaller or you need to focus on playtesting it in the real world with people where you can, go to a place and show them it on a laptop. I started organizing playtesting sessions near to where I live like that because there wasn't anything running locally, and there's always someone that's interested in going to those. It doesn't matter where you live, even if there's no other game developers, which there usually are. You might not find them depending on which platform you're on. Like lots of techie people don't use Facebook anymore, for example. So you might have to be on some other platform. But there's usually people that are interested in the idea of spending a couple of hours some Sunday afternoon hanging out with a local game dev and talking to them about their game. Even if they're just gamers and not game developers, there's usually people around. So it's very much a case of if the thing doesn't exist, you can be the person who builds the thing. You do not have to be like the biggest expert to do that. You can just start a club. Lots of kind of cafes or bars wherever you are will be happy to have you in as a group, as long as you forewarn them and say, hey, can I have a plug socket? Well, you fixed the main thing that was bothering me about the graphical filters on this game, so we're off to a great start. So this is Iterum. It's already on Steam. Gabriel's in the chat, I think. I liked this game the first couple of times I played it. So you'll see we've got this overmap with some locked areas in it, and we have to like get through the dungeon and then go and unlock the other areas. So this helps shrink the scope down from a massive ASCII roguelike like Caves of Qud or whatever, but it also helps to signal the scope at the beginning, which I think is very helpful. Like if you show players, like obviously it's good to have surprises and make a game that's actually bigger than it initially seems, but if you show players at the beginning, oh, there's these 5 things you need to do, then they already have a realistic expectation of what the game is. And lots of bigger games do this as well, like things like Cult of the Lamb. You've got your different dungeons and you can see how many there are, so when you start the first one you're like, okay, this is the first quarter or 20% of the game. Okay, so we can play by clicking, or we can play by a mixture of WASD and clicking. I'm going to be WASDing. Let's go and see what this guy's got to say for himself. Oh, another Spice Raider. Greetings. Have you found any cartographer eyes by any chance? I pay well. I'm also open to get my hands on some chimera entrails as well. I've heard it opens old passages and calms creatures in the deeper levels. Okay, that's cool. So presumably the trader is going to ask for different things each time, and then I need to kind of take a mental note of what they want. Yeah, I love the way the art is handled in this, because I love the aesthetic of ASCII games, but I don't like the, you know, sticking to one or two colors for the sake of authenticity, rather than something like this where it's like, it's very legible. Okay, we've got a pitchfork. It's auto-equipped. I think that's a... Is that an actual mushroom? Grab the mutagen. Oh, we just... They're just stuff we can stand on. We've got a crab. I'm gonna butcher the fungal crawler. I do think that guy was a little bit harder to see, given that he was a... I guess all of the creatures are in white. Yeah, that's a thing. A bog lurker. Yeah, we're gonna... The game kind of opens up a bit once you get your second... Once you get a ranged weapon. So I've only got pitchfork at the moment. We've got some gloves over here. Some lovely bread. Some sort of proximity trap that's going to explode and make fire. Okay. I love all of these little bits of game that add up to make something emergent. I don't know what that fiery thing on the floor is. I think maybe there's a way of... Oh yeah, I can inspect things from a distance. Okay, I need to get in the habit of doing that. So can I... I do think there are certain elements of decoration here that look more important than they are. So all of these big planty fungal things, I really like them, but they don't look like a passable tile. They don't look like negative space that you can walk through. Oh, a trap. I think introducing them into the walls might be a good idea. Like having a way to use these art resources. And it's not even what they're a representation of. It's more just like, even if I don't look at what they are and go, oh, that's a mushroom, that's a plant. They just look too big and important to be something that you can move over. They don't look like negative space at like a purely abstract level, I think. I love how they look. I just think as a game component, they may be, you know, I think making some of these impassable or something that you have to hit to go through, and then these smaller rocks are okay because it still mostly looks like a black piece of floor, whereas this looks like a thing on top of the floor that is okay, tab to go between melee and ranged. So we're on melee now, and then when we go to ranged, it's got this sort of cyan line. There's a potion over there. Can I go through here? Excuse me, ghoul. That was brutal. I was trying to move away from the trap, and then the creature spawned right next to me, and there we go. Pushed him away, and then range attacked him. Time to eat a bread chunk. I'm going to take the mutagen. Your form shifts unpredictably. I'm now a watering can. Okay. I love the like the overall creative direction and world building of this is great because it does a lot of the things I like about Caves of Qud, of like this mix of it being like a dark, serious, strange science fantasy world, and it having these bizarre elements like I turn into a watering can. It's doing all of those things, but the issue I have with Qud, and I haven't gone back to it yet, I will at some point, but that game walks the line between, you know, dungeon crawling roguelike and a traditional RPG where you spend a lot of time setting up your character and then they die in 5 minutes. And I really need to go back to that game and play it on the trad RPG mode rather than the permadeath mode because I always struggled with that. Yeah, see, look, that's just a dungeon floor. That just looks way too important as a motif to not be a thing. So I think there's something to do with just like having some overall rules for visual language and how important things look. Because I think when you've got a shape like this that's like a big iconographic thing that takes up all of the black floor, it doesn't look walkable. Whereas these still look walkable because we can mostly see the black floor. I turned into a steak and now I've turned into a cheese. We're going down. I haven't thoroughly explored that level, but I've at least got my ranged weapon, so I feel reasonably confident. I'm going to take another mutagen. I periodically release toxic clouds. Is art imitating life again? I've only got 1 ammo left, so I need to be careful with my ranged weapon. What are you? You're a spawner? I'm going to beat you up. Pesky fairies. Okay, we're at half health and we're down 1 floor. The water effect's great. I love all of these little VFX for like danger and stuff. And I'm very, very appreciative of the fact that I can zoom out now and I don't get that weird issue with the scan lines from before. Give me some delicious arthropod meat. I don't know if tab is used for anything, but I keep feeling like... Oh yeah, no, it's used to change weapon. I keep feeling like it should be the inventory shortcut. I'm not sure why. Odd vegetables. An injector. Let's do it. Oh, it was a health injector. So do we gain some sort of knowledge of those objects so we can identify them in future? How does that work? Is it like, oh, there's 4 types of injectors, and on each run, if you collect one and use it, you now know what that injector is for the rest of the run? Is there some way of retaining that knowledge unlock across one run or multiple runs? That's what I'm thinking here. Yeah, I would maybe use tab for inventory and then like use shift or something for changing the weapon. Okay. Oof. Who's this? Graft engine. A living machine that can alter your body with a gene graft. Hello. Step closer. The graft engine is awake, but choose carefully. The body remembers every graft, and none of it is free. Beacon. You last longer, but enemies find you more easily. Tainted gift. 10 max HP. Fungal synergy. Healing fungus restores more health. Toxic and poison deal more damage. I don't know if that's a synergy. Bloated. Your body grows denser. Hunger pulls harder. I'm going to go for Beacon, because everything attacks me anyway, so I don't care about being attacked a bit more often. These are blobbies. Healing fungus. Oh, it's a healing fungus. It's got like a... I see. It's like a... Let me open the vault. I love it when someone leaves some lovely scraps of rags in a vault for me. It's my favourite. Oh yeah, I love an upgrade with the downside. It's much more interesting. I picked that one, so just to like think out loud, because that's a helpful thing for playtesters to do. The reason I picked the top one was because I don't have enough game knowledge for the other ones to be useful to me yet. So for example, the fungal one was like, this type of good fungus does more of this good thing, but this type of bad fungus does more of this bad thing. It's like, okay, I can see how that works, but I haven't really played the game enough to have like a intuitive feel for how often these things are useful. So my choice was based on the fact that the top one was the kind of, I understand what this does from run zero kind of thing. There's lots of situations like this where there's just a trap and it's basically, do you want to spend some health to get this thing? Which is okay, but it's something I would think about if it's happening constantly. Get some ammo. I've got 5 more range shots back now. That's good. And some more. 10 range shots. Okay, healing fungus. Don't mind if I do. And a mimic. Okay, we're at full health. Doing good. Definitely feels a lot less harsh than it did, but maybe I'm just playing a bit slower. Let that go off. Let that fire run out and then go over there and get that as well. Oh, the trap keeps going. Okay. I'm going to have to just walk through the fire to get that then. I think that was worth it for 5 more ammo. We traded 10 health for 5 ammo. A ranged cable harpoon. Good for dragging scrap, doors, or people. Okay, I don't think I need that right now, but it looks interesting. I will eat a vegetable. I'm gonna eat a mutagen. Multiple arms. I get extra attacks. Does that mean I can equip 2 weapons as well? No, I just do more attacks, I think. Right, we're going to leave that one because we're not down enough health to waste a fungus. What's this? Suspicious fungi. Confusing but nourishing fungi. It's confusing. Don't mind if I do. Oof. Oof. Right. But now... Crusher boots. Okay, good. I'm going to go back to that healing fungus over here. I'm glad I left that. So those are the kind of moments that you're trying to design for. Is there are things in the game world that are... You know, there's probably things in this level that I just have no idea what they are yet. And when I approach them, I'm going to be like, what the hell is that? But there are some things that are very intuitive. And it's nice to have that mix, right? I'm trying to do that in my game at the moment. It's like some things where it's very obvious how it works and a new player will just immediately get it. Other things where they might have to experiment or be told later on how it works. A balance of those things. And I had a satisfying moment there because, you know, as I was thinking out loud, I didn't need that health yet. I left it there, remembered where it was in the environment, went off, lost some health, came back and used it again. And you've enabled that by the fact that the healing fungus is designed to look like some sort of weird med kit block, even if that's not like the most realistic or cool representation of that thing. Yeah, it's good. And we're going to go over here. We're going to set off the trap. We're going to get some new stuff. And we're going to use these spores to heal before we go back out again. I really like the... I mean... Yeah, I really like the healing fungus as a kind of... It's sort of like a one-off heal that you can get from the environment, but it stays in that place. It's not something you can pick up. So if you want to save it for later, you have to come back. That creates some like interesting decisions. You don't need complicated mechanics and content to make players have interesting decisions. And if anything, having simpler individual components and then just like thinking about how they all interact is often a better recipe for that. New helmet. Right, what are we wearing now? We've got rag wrap. Is that better than what I've got? That puts my dodge down, but puts my defense up. Okay, I want that. Heavy hammer gives me a stun effect. It's more durability than my pitchfork. Let's go with the heavy hammer. And then... let's try the hammer and the harpoon, so I can pull things towards me and then bonk them with the hammer. Somewhere safe. Spice and the right meat. Can something something. Hello. Hello. Who are you? Something old stirs beneath the lowest floors. We haven't found what we came for. Not yet. We dug deep and scavenged what we could. But every step deeper was paid in blood. Okay. I would like you to dig further down, but I want to talk to these guys first. I can sacrifice some HP to get a thing. I can become feeble. I don't want any of them. They're all trade-off things. You can one-shot things, but you lose maximum health every time. They're cool trade-offs, but I'm trying to focus on actually surviving this time. Genetic sample. These are genetic blueprints. Does this mean I don't get these right now? But unlocks deeper dungeon tiers. Okay. Dig deeper down. Don't poison me, bro. That was fun. This is the first time I've got to use my harpoon gun, and I used it to pull a nest close to me, which I don't know if that's supposed to be able to move, but it was fun nonetheless. Okay, we're going to disassemble some of these older items. Don't need to be carrying around 2 pitchforks for the American Gothic Cosplay Society. Delicious arthropods. I think a thing you could do is like have a color range for things that are flat on the floor that you can walk over. And like that skull or those bones, they can stay as that icon, but they should probably still be like in that range of greys or purples, and they can't get any brighter. So what you could do is, if there were actually layers that exist in the game, is put like a filter over that layer that limits like the brightness and saturation of everything under it, or something like that, and then you can kind of draw everything how you want. I'm going through iterations of that with my game at the moment, where it's like using posterize effects to limit the palette down back from what my art assets have actually gone to. Uh, I love the color palette though. I love what the objects look like. I love the giant plants and fungus and stuff. I'm probably going to put a big spooky jungle plant like this in my game. Just copy this one exactly. It's very cool. It's like a big what type of plant is that? Like a lily or a lotus or something. I'm going to steal it. Hello, masked chimera. Have you considered being bonked on the head with a big hammer? Oof. Oh, I did it. Edible on emergencies. A dung pile. Ah, the small devices are like grenades. I see, but you don't know what they do until you throw them. Interesting. I love how cozy these bits look. They're kind of creepy and cozy at the same time. Hello, Fleshbinder. Your skin hardens like leather, your defense increases, but you lose maximum HP. Now, I'm not so worried about losing maximum HP because I don't have as much actual HP, so we're going to go for that. We're going to lose some maximum HP for thick skin. The thing is dead. Other sealed passengers lie waiting across the surface, but they demand a genetic sample as tribute. Time to head back up. Are you ready to be extracted to the surface? I still have the option to dig deeper down, so I'm going to do it. Okay. Need to be a bit more careful now because... Oh, I'm poisoned. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm going to die, and I don't know why. Ugh. Yeah, I would like more downside variety would be good. Losing an inventory slot, that's a good... Let's brainstorm new downsides you could have. Losing an inventory slot. Losing visibility range. Having status effects like poison last like 3 stages longer. I think they just need to be clear so that the trade-off makes sense when a new player sees it. Because if you say weak to poison, it's like, well, what does that mean? Poison always does 1 more damage to you. That's like very clear, like mechanically clear. Losing an inventory slot. Yeah, I don't know what else. Yeah, I like nearly all of the mechanical parts of this game. I think there are some little UX and UI things that you're probably already aware of that can be improved on, but you're already at the stage now where this is on Steam and you're going to be getting feedback from way more people. So you're at the stage now where you need to be like looking at what multiple people say about those things and trying to work out the solution that solves most of them at once rather than one person's feedback. I love the aesthetic of it, but I do think the legibility of what's collidable and what's not needs to be worked out a little bit more. Another one of my little puppets stumbling through the dark. Waz moves your strings. Oh, this is a tutorial character that I didn't talk to earlier. Waz moves your strings. Space makes you act, interact, consume. A clever one might use room on the world, on things, on threats, but there is more to you than movement and action. Press ESC sometimes. You might learn what else your strings can do. Great dialogue. That guy's what I would think of as a Dark Souls MF right there. Here's all the things you can do. You can wish list on Steam. My puppet, ha 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 ha, for example, is a thing you could do. Deaths. $1 burned. Hello. Oh no. Don't walk in the fire. Hello, who are you? Careful around the safeguard units below. They were once security beacons. What were once security beacons are now corrupted and extremely dangerous to anyone without the proper gene access. Right, we are going to do one more run, but I'm going to do a 5-minute break to get a coffee, and then we're going to do one more run. So let's go to relaxing liquid drum and bass. Wait music. Be right back. Hello, we're back. I've got my official apocalypse juice ready. Yeah, so folks who are already on the Discord, you can keep an eye on this one or poke Gabriel on there to play it. Iron Husk Depths. Oh, it's got a different name now, so we're not using the same name for each dungeon each time. Okay. Unknown mutagen. I'm gonna put these gloves on before I try and fight this guy. I've got a carapace. You see a little, looks like a little hood over there, but it's my carapace. Oh, we've got different environmental details as well. So you're setting like the theme of the dungeon in terms of like which of these incidental plants appear. Give me them veggies. Give me the suspicious cacti. I'm going to eat the suspicious cacti. I think the approach to food in this game is good because we don't have loads of slots for our inventory and all items take up the same space. But I think in like any game that kind of evokes a post-apocalyptic survival type setting, you're going to want some sort of like, oh, I'm trying to look for weapons, but also I'm gathering food and stuff. And because they're mainly just healing items, you tend to use them straight away, so they don't take up the space. But it's just tight enough for the inventory management to feel like it matters a little bit, you know? Okay, I need to remember to use my devices this time, which means I can throw stuff. We've got a dart gun. We've only got 5 ammo, so I need to be careful with the dart gun and not overuse it straight away. We've got a butcher knife. Is that better than what I've got? Yeah, bleed over time, sharp, better durability. Let's get that. And I'm going to break down the... Oh. What just happened? Right, I want to break down the brass knuckles. Get used to doing that so I don't end up not being able to pick things up. 1 second. Okay. You can cure stuff in inventory synthesis so it doesn't rot. That's cool. I'm going to go on full screen for a little while. Keep the chat box up. It will pop back in a moment when someone posts something new. Okay. I'm going to try this time to be a bit more thorough in exploring the top 2 or 3 floors because presumably they're going to be easier. So it's probably better to spend the resources exploring the top more thoroughly and then rush it a little bit more when we get further down. Okay. Trying to shoot the spawner from a distance. Take these guys out. Small device, throw it over there. I've stunned it. Yeah, I don't have that same problem with these environmental objects of like not being able to see what's walkable. Maybe it's to do with the saturation or something, I don't know. Grab the helmet. Okay. That wasn't great, but we're alright, we're through it. There's a lot of these pesky little fairy spawners. And I don't have any ammo to take them out from range either. So we're going to leave those. One thing I don't like, and I know it's a very normal roguelike thing, but I think given your approach so far, it might be worth thinking about because you're doing a lot of things to sort of modernize a trad roguelike. I think a thing that really bothers me is how often we're just getting an enemy appear from nowhere 3 spaces away. Because it kind of undermines the visibility mechanics of the game a little bit. That, you know, I can see, you know, we've got these visibility mechanics and I can see quite far, but then an enemy just spawns there for no reason and runs at me. And I think making sure that most, if not all, of those enemy spawns have a clear tell. Because the fairies coming out of the tower thing, that's fine because I can see they're coming from a thing and I can do something about it. I can intervene. I can go and try and kill the spawner so that they don't spawn as fast. I can see where they're coming from. When we've got characters just coming out the water, it's like, okay, maybe we should have like 1 or 2 ticks where there's bubbles in the square where they're going to come from before they come out. And then that serves multiple things. It allows us to be warned about the fact something's coming from there. And it also kind of gives a sense of dread of like, oh no, something's coming from there. And then you see what it is. So it adds a stage to our realization that things are spawning and coming out of there. Yeah, just some sort of warning. Just like bubbles in the water or whatever would be appropriate. Crack in the ground. Bubble if it's water. Just like 1 or 2 turns depending on what it is. I mean, it also means that it can become like a vector of balancing. Like, you know, easy creatures give you a longer period of time to know when they're gonna pop up. What does the portable eruptor do? An ancient cannon capable of firing proto-shells, casted iron filled with gunpowder. The concussive blast disorients targets. Okay, that's good. It confuses them. We can do an unknown... Let's do an unknown injector. Oh, that was a poison removal that we didn't need. But we know what it is now, at least. It seems like most of the injectors are positive. It's just you don't know whether you need them or not when you use them. Big hammer? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I'm gonna die. I'll eat some mutant in the corner. Okay, try again. I think one of the... This isn't necessarily a criticism of the game. I'm just kind of thinking through my experience every time I play one of these. It's very easy to play them too fast. And I don't really necessarily think that's something that needs to be solved. But I do think if it was your goal to, like, take this style of game and update it and make it appeal to, like, a slightly newer audience, then I think that could be something that's worth thinking about. Because it's very easy to start playing too fast without like noticing things or seeing the potential consequences of things. Even like if I walk left, I can tap it and I can tap very fast to walk left, and if I hold left, I think, oh no, you can't hold. But it's very easy to just get into this like speedily moving around. And that's the norm, right? I'm not saying that this is wrong, but it does make me think. I think if this was my game and I was like trying to update the genre in some way, I might think of like having some sort of deliberate friction about how fast things happen. It's kind of like when you play card games Like something like Slay the Spire, it's very easy to get into a thing where you're kind of overconfident and you're playing too fast, and then you mess up because you're playing too fast. And there's no reason you should be doing that because it's a turn-based game. And but like all of like the animations of the cards coming out and going into things and stuff forces you to slow down and have space to think, where you might otherwise like be cocky and just not take the time when you need it. Yeah, see, I'm using the keyboard, so I'm not even using the kind of auto movement thing that comes with the mouse, but yeah, I do often feel like things are surprising me more than they should. Okay, new mutagen, what does this do? Randomly teleports you. Oh, that doesn't seem good. Right. We've got a hammer and a gun. I'm going to use a different injector. Oh, that doesn't work because I'm not poisoned. I've got 12 shots of my ranged weapon, so I need to remember to use that. I'm being teleported about randomly, so that's an annoying mutagen, and I probably need to replace it as soon as possible. It's a good job they don't stack. They're just constantly coming out of nowhere, see? It's a cool effect, and it gives them character, because the mutants always seem to come out of that water, right? So it gives them character, and like these creatures have a thing that they do and a place that they come from. That's good, but the kind of UX of it would be much better to get some sort of warning. And that warning, like I say, it can be a UX thing to give the player a little bit more foresight, but it can also be something that builds like this ominous quality of you walk into that water pool and there's suddenly 5 things around you and you're like, oh no. Kind of make it slightly easier but also slightly scarier at the same time, which I think is a nice thing to aim for. You know, you get the emotions of the thing out of the player without ruining their game. Unstable form again. I mean, I guess it makes it easier to search the whole level. Collapsing floor. Does that take you down a level if you fall down it? Crusher boots. What is that? Tongue lasher. Like some sort of fungus thing that's trying to attack me. I'm going to yeet this at it. Stunned. Excellent. When in doubt, throw a thing at a thing. A lot of the systems in this remind me quite a bit of, and you, Gabriel, you probably get some ideas from this if you haven't, if you're not aware of it. There was a video game of this. But I didn't really like the video game so much. So the RPG system Numenera is a science fantasy thing. It's got kind of Final Fantasy vibes. It's got Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun kind of vibes. It's ostensibly set on Earth, but like millions of years into the future after it's been like visited by loads of different aliens. And the characters in it are essentially kind of high fantasy characters. and like magic exists, but it's probably nanobots and alien technology and stuff, and it's all based around that. I think it's Arthur C. Clarke quote that sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And one of the things they do in this system that's really fun thing, it's a fun thing to play and GM around, is that so in Tides of Numenera, I didn't really like Tides of Numenera very much. I thought it took itself too seriously and was just kind of clunky and didn't make the best of the setting. So the way that magic works a lot of the time in things like D&D is you've got scrolls, right, which are like one-shot spells, and you've got magic users that can use spells all the time, and then you've got scrolls which are like, the magical equivalent of a grenade, a one-shot spell that is just like, does this particular healing spell, this particular invisibility spell. And in Numenera they have a similar thing with like gadgets. You might find like an alien, like a broken arm of a robot, and you sort of point it at something and it does an energy blast, and then it's gone. It's just like a one-shot cantrip spell that is delivered through like a consumable object, a consumable gadget, and that's kind of how you get this fantastical post-apocalyptic flavor in Numenera. Is all of these one-shot items that mechanically are identical to scrolls in something like D&D, but they are like alien gizmos that explode when you use them and stuff like that. I feel like there's a lot of that flavor here. I love this whole thing of like you pick up devices, and devices are basically a grenade, but you don't really know what it's going to do when you throw it. Jeez. I should probably try Tides of Numenera again. I mean, I've got it. I don't know. When I compare those recent ones, like Pillars, I love Pillars of Eternity, but I do think it cares a little bit too much for its story and world building, and not enough for like the actions the player is supposed to be taking, like the role playing that the player is doing. If I go back and I compare it to the original Baldur's Gate games, it's just not as player centric, I think, is the thing that bothers me. Okay, we're going to get a gene graft. We can have slow metabolism. We can have last stand. When death approaches you, fight harder. We can have fool's bargain. The world slightly tilts in your direction. You feel lucky. Lucky for 20 minus XP. Let's do it. I don't know what that means, but... Run away from these guys. Oh my goodness, come on. Brutal. Ah, some emergency surgery. Let's get a new mutagen. Sharp claws. Cause bleed on hit. Okay, that's good. I'm a kitty cat. I've got the furry mutagen. Okay, I'm gonna die again soon. I'm not doing good. Hmm. I'm enjoying it. I don't feel like I'm getting any better at it. I love all the names of things. The flavoring of things in this is really good. Dry organs. I'm a parasite with dry organs. Yeah, the game does kind of let you get ahead of yourself. I think that is part of what I'm feeling. Like, I think working out whether to explore a whole floor or go to the next floor prematurely is an interesting decision. But when I decide it, I don't really feel like I understand what information I'm working with. I'm making a judgment, but I mean, maybe that's just a case of like people will be able to make that judgment better after a couple of hours or something. But it's really hard to say at this stage. Rare ancient device may contain usable information if consumed. Dietary observations. Stored in memories. Okay. Memories. So these are all the things that we've collected information about on this in this world, in this run. The meat down here changes you. Not at first. One serving tastes wrong, two and your stomach turns, keep eating the same kind and something happens. A researcher fed cave rat to a subject for a week straight, but the end... That was a bit... by the end, the subject could see in the dark. The old engineers called it adaptive consumption. Okay. I'm parasitic, berserk, and oily. How about you? My tendrils grow hungrier. What does that mean? Hungry tendrils coil through your circulatory system. Some kills feed the growth within, converting life force into healing. Self-drain, increased hunger. Okay, that's fun. Muddy, dry organs. Your body dries out. Hunger slows, but water hurts. Oh, it hurts me to go through water. That's a good trade-off. We don't get hungry as quickly, but we can't. It hurts us to go through water. Oof. Keep getting the teleportation mutagen. Oh no, it was a teleportation injector that time. I see. Dang. Give me that cheese. Enemies detect you from further away. I'm loud. I love it. Yeah, Paul. It was the last run I put the debug on and was giving myself mutations. So the way the game works, you've got like weapon slots for a melee and ranged weapon. And then you've got injectors, which do things like potions. You've got devices which you throw, which are like grenades. And everything you pick up on every run, you don't know what it is at the start. But there's only a set of things in each category. So you might, identify which injector is the anti-venom injector in the first dungeon or whatever. So you're kind of like gaining information about which things have been unidentified each run, and then yeah, the mutations replace each other, but you only have one at a time, and you don't know what they're going to be. It's like a big fat uh, pivot in your, what would you call it? Sort of buffs and debuffs. It's great. I really like it. I do wish there was a little bit more in the game to sort of slow me down when I'm in combat because I don't feel like I'm making good tactical choices. But also that's a recurrent problem I've had with most of these games. Ever since I played the first one years and years ago, is everything is like, do I run away or do I just hammer the thing? So I don't know how much of that is just me having a problem with the genre. So it's definitely time with this to hone in on playtesting it with people that are very, very. I mean, I know that Gabriel's already done this quite a bit, but I think testing this with people that are absolute sickos for all of the old school roguelikes, and then continuing to think in a way that I think you already have been about which bits are you willing to change and stuff like that. But yeah, I do feel like the game allows me to play a little bit too fast even when I'm not using the click to move. I mean, I haven't been using click to move, I've been using WASD. It allows me to play a little bit too fast. There aren't many points where the game sort of forces me to take a quick moment and think. The card shuffle or whatever would be the equivalent. And I feel like that's maybe hampering my learning as a player, if that makes sense, because a lot of the times when I've died, I've just ended up in a situation where I'm completely crowded and I'm sort of like panic clicking and doing stuff, sort of behaving in a way that I don't need to because it's a turn-based game. But yeah, it's like test it with the sickos, continue to think about how you want it to diverge from those more trad games, and like keep working on the visual visibility of stuff. I think it was literally just those mushrooms because the plants look much more clearly like a floor object than the mushrooms do. But yeah, I'm going to wrap it up there, I think, for today. And yeah, go and check it out. It's on, I think there's a Steam page for it already for Iterum. So there's not a public playtest yet, but there is a page for it, so you can go and kind of follow it and see what's going on with it. Thanks, Gabriel, for submitting that. I've played it a few times on stream now. This is one of our patrons' games, so there are a bunch of people that support this channel on Patreon and allow me to do this regularly, to run these streams and playtest people's games. Earlier on in the stream, we had a little itch game that was like a Game Boy emulator game, I think, or very much styled to look like one if it wasn't, which was called Synergy Abyss. You can check out Synergy Abyss. There should be links in the YouTube video if you want to find links to any of the games. As always, always put the links in. If there aren't links, because you're on Twitch or something, it means something has messed up and I need to get in contact with Streamlabs about that. Yeah, Synergy Abyss was the kind of Severance meets Shin Megami Tensei office dungeon crawler, which is a funny concept, but felt like it needed something else to use as its core rather than the combat system, because the combat system introduced all of these great lovely characters and stuff but wasn't necessarily super exciting to do as an activity. So yeah, thanks for dropping in today. If you are kind of just hanging out and haven't yet, I mean, I know most of the people who are live in the chat will be members already. Go and check out patreon.com/indie game clinic. You can see other stuff we do on there. I do a bunch of podcasts. We've now got a new thing where I do 3 of these Q&A questions a month. So which day are we on? So on Friday, we should have the next set of what's it called? The next request for Q&A questions. So a little bit of context there, and probably related to what Yellow Star was saying in the chat earlier. I had a bunch of videos up on this channel about a year ago, which were much more Q&A type stuff, and people would ask me a question, I would give a reasonably direct answer about what I thought about that thing. And I ended up taking a lot of them down because I guess a lot of it is to do with what I want this channel to be, and some of it's to do with my stance on education as well. But I think that learning something like game design is about doing the thing, and not like deferring to an expert and seeing what they say and getting them to tell you what to do, right? And a lot of that kind of content where people are just kind of agony aunting or asking kind of exactly what they should do in a situation, it can be helpful, but it's usually more helpful to do if the people know each other. You know, it's much more easy to get a helpful response from a mentor if it's someone that knows you. So I took a lot of that content down because I didn't want the channel to just be me being a talking head saying, hey guys, you should do this. There's lots of problems with that type of content, and part of it is that as soon as you can find like a 10 top tips rule that everyone should follow, it becomes so vague that it's kind of pointless, which is why so much of what I do is like playing and responding to actual games and like thinking about them in context. Because you can look at a type of game and go, oh, it would be better if so-and-so did it this way. But you've got to think about the project context of who's making it as well. And telling someone, oh, you should change it in this way is not always helpful if that person can't do that or for whatever reason. But people who were patrons told me some of those videos were useful. We would like you to keep doing that. So now I just do those on Patreon instead. So the YouTube channel, I do streams like this. I do video essays like the one that went up last week about difficulty and challenge. The one about playtesting that we did a couple of months ago. The one about game design theory from last month. I do video essays like that, all of that kind of stuff on YouTube, which is the stuff that I feel proud of and I feel is reasonably evergreen. But the stuff where people just kind of like want to ask me one question and have me talk about it for 10 minutes or whatever, that's over on Patreon now. And it's just, I feel more comfortable with it being there because the people asking me questions, it's a much smaller group of people. I know who you are. I know your games. It's not the random like 1,000 people who will watch this on the stream afterwards. Who people come and ask me very generic questions like, which game engine should I use? Or, how do I know if it's worth doing this in my game? And it's like, I don't know you. I don't know your game. I cannot answer that question. You need to work these things out for yourself by doing stuff. So a lot of the time when people ask those really broad generic questions, what they're doing is they're trying to avoid the work of doing the thing to find out. Because most of the time, the best way to answer your own questions is to start doing the thing. That's why we prototype and stuff like that. But yeah, so when it's someone you can give people good feedback. You can give them contextual feedback. Can't do that with strangers. So that's what all that's about. And I appreciate everyone supporting for that. Paul said, I've been lucky to have lots of feedback on my newest project, but I also know some of it is premature advice because the project isn't in a position where people can experience the emotion I want them to as a designer yet. So I can only imagine how hard it is to give good advice on a project you haven't had any involvement in. Yeah, it's like, well, there's the project context and then there's the developer context. It's like, what is the game currently? What can we see from just looking at the game? And then it's like, who is making it? And what are their strengths and weaknesses? And sometimes you can intuit one thing from the other, right? We can look at Synergy Abyss and we can say, okay, everything I can see about this game, if we treat it as a prototype, because this was a game jam entry, right? I can see this is made by someone who's a very competent artist and has a visual style. So if one of our solutions of what they should do to make this game better involves make more art, then we know that's not a problem because they're good at that, right? So we can infer the developer context from the state of the project to some degree. And that's why I think sometimes when you've got a prototype and you take it to playtesting, it's worth polishing some areas of it, some of the areas that matter, because otherwise people are going to not feel comfortable telling you what you need to improve, because most people's response to, unless they're fellow developers or they're just very critical, most people's normal response is to be polite and go, oh, you've made a game, that's really difficult, I couldn't do that, therefore I'm incredibly impressed by everything in this. And it's like, no, I don't want you to be impressed, I want you to look at it like a gamer would, and like tell me what's bad about it. And I mean, it's a double-edged sword. If you polish it too much, people are going to think, and I think the developer of I can't remember your name, sorry, the developer of when the cracks, what was it called, cracks let the light in, cracks where the light gets in, like a historical puzzle game we played a few months ago. The developer of that on our playtesting video talked about this, where if you make all of the art a little bit too polished, people feel uncomfortable at criticizing it, because they're like, well, it looks so far along that I don't want to criticize it, because you might not be willing to change it because you've put too much work into it already. And I know I feel that way sometimes when I see certain types of games that look like they're very far along. But if you haven't polished any part of the game, then the people giving you feedback don't have a sense of what your strengths and weaknesses are, and they can't base their feedback on what they've seen you do, right? So that's why, I'm always happy to play people's prototypes. But when people send me a prototype and it's like an absolute grey box of just basic first-person shooter mechanics, it's like, well, there's so little information here about what you can do and what you want to do. It's basically just like a technical learning project of, can I build the basic features of a first-person shooter? And it's like, well, you've learned everything you need to from that, which is, yes, you can. But in order for that to be a prototype of a game, it needs to have a theme or some art elements so people can like look at it and go, okay, I understand what you're trying to do here. Whereas if what you're trying to do here is just build the 3 basic mechanics of an FPS, it's like, well, yeah, you did it. You can tell that yourself. You don't need someone else to tell you that, Yeah, the polish needs to match the stage the game is at, and it also needs to match what you're testing. Because I think I sent this video to someone else for a different reason this morning, but let me just find. What's the name of the developer? There's another YouTube channel about game dev. Okay, this one. Fast forward your game. Early polishing kills your game. This video. Fast forward my game is a great channel. I really like this. It is still a bit more didactic and like, you should do exactly this than I think, than the way I think. But there are some great examples in this of like where it's good to have some things polished in the context of a prototype. So here the developer is talking about their game Cannon Head. Here we go. And this is a good example of a game where it's like, okay, we should greybox most of the game, and we should make the game, and the reason for greybox, make it quickly and make it as quickly as possible so that you can test the thing that matters, which is the gameplay, right? So we should do that. So we should make the level in greybox and stuff. But if this is a character-driven action game, then maybe we need to push the character a little bit further in terms of its polish. Because if we don't, it's just like, okay, what are we testing? Because what's the part of the game that's like the unique thing about this game that we actually need to test? Because otherwise it just becomes a technical learning project of, can I build a level and make a thing run around in it? And that's not testing game design, because we know that a thing running around in a level is a normal part of a game, right? Yeah, Paul as well. So Paul, you were saying you get people feedback a lot about the grey box of the project. Yeah, it's like I think some of that's framing as well, and just making sure people have a good sense going into the playtest of what to focus on. Is game feel for shooting in an FPS polish or critical in your opinion? Well, I think the difference is like it's not about whether or not something's polished. It's about whether or not you think polish should happen at different project stages. Because often we use the term polish to describe stuff that you only do right at the end before launch. And I don't think that's how it works. I think basically everything needs polishing at some point, and some things should be polished very early on, and some things don't need to be polished until later. Right? So I think another way of thinking about it that applies to Cannon Head and every other game on some level, right? It applies to Cannon Head in the sense that the Cannon Head is what we care about. And if you were making a menus game that was all about clicking buttons in a simulator or something, then clicking the buttons is what matters because it's the interface between the player and the game, right? So what I would say is rather than thinking of polish as this thing you do at the end to like zhuzh something up, it's more the fact that everything requires polish at some point in a project, but the things that the player is actually playing with all of the time require polish earlier because they are closer to being part of the heart of the game, and they're on a purely like practical level, they're the thing that the player is doing all of the time, and they're going to get irritated by if it doesn't work, right? And then on a more kind of ephemeral kind of marketing and creative direction kind of level, the way that your slide on the ground or your reload feels or whatever is the thing that distinguishes FPS A from FPS B. So it's part of like the secret sauce of your game. So even in those contexts, it's worth polishing those things very early on. So I guess another thing, if you go and look at Blagas's videos about Blood Thief, you'll see the same thing. So this game took me 2.5 years to make. This is a very good summary of the Blood Thief development process that happened quite early on. You go back to these early videos, this is before any levels have been built, and he's like prototyping the slide mechanic and how that feels, and then changing it so that the slide knocks enemies over so that they don't just brick wall you and stuff like that. You know, so Maverick made a good point. It's hard for the person making the game. They're too close to the game they're making. They see all the minor increments and get lost. Yes. But yeah, animations aren't polished. Sound effects aren't necessarily polished when they're about communication. And I think the other thing, to be aware of as well is that games don't teach their players on a purely cognitive level. They teach them on an emotional level, right? So when I say learning by emotion, if you think of emotions like shame and pride, right? If you are going to a class, whether it's like a traditional academic class or like a sport or a martial art, and someone like mocks you for being weak at that thing, you will learn through shame. If someone like praises you for being good at a thing, you will learn through pride. It's not, there's like an extra layer of reinforcement of the learning that comes from that emotional aspect of being shamed or made to feel pride for something. And that makes you learn quicker. That's why we have those emotions. And you can explain something to people intellectually through words and say, hey, this is how you do this thing. But that's usually not as powerful as getting someone to do the thing that you've explained and then making them feel a positive or negative emotion based on how they did the thing, right? So all of those little sound effects and VFX and game feel things that are often described as being juice or polish, a lot of them are just polish and they can happen at the end of the project. But when they're related to like emotionally rewarding or punishing the player for doing the core mechanics correctly or incorrectly, then they matter a lot more early on, right? So if you think of a project timeline and you've got like the idea at the start, and then you build a prototype, and then from the prototype you work out whether you want to continue the game and make a full game, I would say that the polish of the core mechanics of like your combat with your main character, or the interactions with the buttons, if it's like an incremental business management game where you're all in an interface, all of that side of feel, like the core feel of the sound effects and the VFX for like the main things that the player does all the time, that's actually in the middle of the timeline or near to the start. It's as you move from a prototype to making the full version of the game, those things should start to be locked in because they're part of the heart of the game, and they're part of the like reinforcement loop of how a player learns what they're supposed to do and what they're supposed to avoid in your game. Because you can tell people, this is how you play the game, this is what you're supposed to do, this is what you're not supposed to do. But those things that we reduce to being juice or VFX or treating as polish that happens at the end, on a purely practical level, yes, you should leave it as late as possible, but your playtesters are not fully going to understand the game or vibe with it on the level that you really need to, that you need them to, in order to like understand whether your game is worth making, if you don't introduce some of that stuff. And then I think there's another issue on top of that, where it's like, obviously we have all of these best practices for making a game well and like making it efficiently, like gray boxing, and you do a gray box, and then if you want to experiment with the art style, you do that somewhere else, and you make what's called a beautiful corner. You make a separate little bit of the level, so you keep your gray box and the beautiful corner separate. That's very good advice, right? Because you still advance the art style, but you don't embed the art in the levels and then make it difficult to change or move around. That's good advice. But what people tend to do is they take the efficiency advice to make the gray box and to not add all of this stuff that's polish, and they use that as an excuse to not engage with those things, which means that they don't then build up the skills in those things. And that's fine if you're working in a traditional game studio, or if you're in a team where you're like the main programmer and then there's another animator and there's a VFX artist, and they can be off on their own learning those things. But if you're a solo developer, which I imagine a lot of the people watching this channel are, it is worth doing things the slightly long-winded, slightly inefficient way, because you're going to have to learn the workflow for putting sound effects and music in your game. You're going to have to learn the workflow for doing VFX in your game. And if you don't have all of that knowledge already, you may as well practice it at some point. So I think a lot of the time what happens is people give out this very broad-based, and this comes back to what I was saying earlier about like advice and contextualizing advice of like, who is this for? What career state are they at? What state is their project in? Because if you're like making games and you're making your first attempt at a commercial game, and you're being told, oh yeah, don't do VFX yet, don't do screen shake yet, don't refine the controller feel yet, because it's not the sensible time in the project to do that. And it's like, well, if you don't actually know how to do those things yet and you need to learn how to do those things, then it's a pretty good time to do them, right? And it's easy to go, okay, well, then we get into sunk cost, and you might have a bad project and you don't want to throw it away because you spent so much time like learning how to do screen shake or whatever the thing is. Right. Okay, that's your problem. But the goal really should then be to go, okay, well, before I really start worrying about whether my game is commercially viable and like finishing a game and getting that kind of idea of like the professional efficient way to make a game, is only helpful if you actually already know all of the things you're going to need to do to make a game. If you don't, then you're much better just dipping into all of the disciplines, like working out how you make your art, working out how you do your sound effects, working out how you do VFX, and not actually worrying about like being professional or making a game properly until you've learned all of those skills. So it's kind of like this mix of people taking advice that makes sense in the context of a professional studio where everyone can already do all of their jobs properly, and applying it in a hobbyist context where it might not actually be as appropriate because that person wants to make a game on their own, and in order to do that they need to learn all of the subdisciplines of game development. And that means that maybe doing some things prematurely is good for them because they don't actually know how to do shaders or VFX or whatever in their game engine, and they need to learn it at some point. So I would kind of take all of that into account as well when you have these questions about when to polish, because if you don't know how to polish yet and you don't know all of the little sub skills involved in that, then the best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago, and the second best time is tomorrow. That thing. Just going back through the chat because I've been not looking. Yeah, an arcade racer is a great example of a thing where you can like polish the car and the car feel and like keep the level design in Greybox for a very long time, Froggy. For Hot Worlds, I agree. Designers need to be able to identify what is and isn't important to their game. Ignore the word polish. Make what is important. No buggy. Yeah, exactly. You need a sense of what's important in your own game. Does it communicate? So I think the takeaway really, I'm trying to skim read what everyone's saying and like turn it into one thing. And Ponius is talking about, this thing of like, I've got a feature in my game about how enemies behave or how they look. I'm trying to work out if it's polish or not. Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're getting at because, and what Hot World said, the idea of polish is fine, but don't take an external idea of what is polish and apply that to like your game or every game that you're trying to help someone else out with by giving them feedback. Because what is and isn't polish is going to be contextual, right? People hate things being contextual. You see it on Reddit. People ask for advice and someone gives a response that's like, well, it depends. If A, then B. If C, then D. And people go, oh, I hate it when people say it depends. Well, you know what? It does. And you know when it depends even more? When you want to make like incredibly complex, interactive, creative projects and make them all on your own and start a business doing those things. You have to be able to make these decisions and judgments. And that's not to say that you need to be able to make them entirely on your own, but even just accepting the fact that it is your responsibility to decide what's important in your own project is such a big threshold to be able to cross for yourself. And like most people's failures in most creative realms just really come from being in denial about the basic reality of the thing they're trying to do. So I think like a good bit of homework for people here to look into is this. I'm like psychological concept I've been writing about in my book at the moment. The idea of locus of control. Think about how you think about your own projects and about advice that you get on the internet. And go and read up about what locus of control means, because you will find that the majority of discussion about games and how you should make them is aimed at people who have an external locus of control, i.e. they are people who have a psychological tendency to think that things are beyond their control and they should like go to other people for answers and someone else can tell them the right way of doing things and all that kind of stuff. It's an interesting concept. It's kind of a side note for here, but I think the conversation that Ponius and Froggy and Hot Wells were having in the chat is a really good example of people having an internal locus of control where it's like, oh, actually, yeah, I need to come up with my own way of assessing my project and working out what is and isn't important. And I need to, even like the process of prototyping, it's like, okay, every stage of the prototype, what are you testing and why? Some of that might be to do with you testing your own ability to make something, which is what I call technical feasibility prototyping rather than game design prototyping. They're like different things. This is all about like self-leadership. Like, what do I need to know next? What do I need to build so I can have more information about what's working and what's not working to get to the next stage? And that kind of differentiation we talked about with polish is an example of that, because it's very common for people to just treat polish as this universal term of like, oh, all VFX is polish, right? So their idea is that you make a game and it's completely Spartan and totally grey box up until the last month of development, and then all of the music and VFX and stuff goes in at the end because it's just polish. Of course, that's not how it works. You develop the core and you polish the core, and then you gradually add the more secondary and tertiary content, and then you gradually polish that as well. And obviously, premature polish slows you down. It creates rigidity so that it's harder to change things, but sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's good to lock certain things in a project in, because that makes you commit to it, right? And sometimes it's good to commit to something and go, this part's not changing, because otherwise you never finish things. If you keep everything in a eternally flexible, malleable state, then you will be one of those people that just is constantly making the same game for 10 years, and you look back and it's actually been 10 different games, and it changes once a year into a totally different game. No, Paul, don't feel bad. It's a good conversation. Just having a look back in the chat. I think, I'm not, the thing is, I'm not saying don't grey box. I'm just saying at each stage of what you do, think about which element is best to do in the quickest, fastest way, and which element is better to, like, quote unquote, overdevelop or over polish a little bit. And especially if the polishing process is something you need to learn, then you need to learn it incrementally. And this is with all things. Every time we think, oh, I can leave that bit till last, you get to the bit you can do last, whether it's like writing an essay for university or like setting up a Steam page. Every time you leave the thing till last because you think it's going to take you 10 minutes, it ends up being something that takes 10 hours. So it's always better to approach most things incrementally, especially when you're new to them, because you're not going to get them right first time, and there's going to be a bunch of little sub skills baked into that thing. Like it kind of applies to everything, like building Steam pages, writing something versus editing it. You kind of have to do everything in little bits as you go along. And I think that the overarching problem is that none of us really know what we're doing. So the people that want to give the impression that they know what they're doing just kind of take insights from, like, someone a 500 staff Ubisoft studio says about this is how you do things, and then they apply it to like a project being made by one person that only started using a game engine 6 months ago, and it's like, well, it's not transferable. I was just laughing at Ponius's Warhammer joke. Yeah, so with the prototyping and the sliding thing, that's a good example of, like, you could sometimes you test sometimes you test an idea to see if the idea works, and sometimes you test an idea to see if you can execute the idea, and those are slightly different tests. And I think it's helpful to know which thing you're doing at any given time, because a lot of the time when I'm building things, I'm not super confident in my technical ability to code things, so I'm doing it to test if I can even do it. And then at some point I'll be like, okay, I can probably do that. Now what's the test to see if it, like, actually works from a gameplay perspective, which is a different sort of test. Just like having that awareness of like why you're doing things is really, really helpful. Right. Just going to go back and see if I've missed anything. So yeah, I think the thing that people So I think we're all trying to build these in our heads all the time. Rubrics. So like a way of So a rubric is a way of taking like a relatively subjective judgment and turning it into a point score of some sort, right? I used to have to make these for like grading people's assignments at university for teaching. But I've also seen producers use these. So when I used to work at King, we had a product manager, and I'm sure there's no industry secrets here because it's just like a product management methodology he'd brought in from somewhere else. But if we had proposals for what to do with a new build of the game or a new event in the game or a new feature, he would have a scoring system in a spreadsheet, and it was like things get points for meeting certain criteria. So For example, something would get points if it uses a piece of technology we've used before, right? So for you, it might be you look at your 5 new game ideas and you see that one of them reuses a bunch of your tech stack from your last game. Okay, that's going to give it some points. And then you look at another one and you go, okay, well, this idea actually is not a good fit for me in terms of what I can do, but it would allow me to learn that skill. So you might give it a certain amount of points for that, right? So you develop a rubric which takes these subjective judgments and allows you to score them by saying this type of thing gets 3 points, this type of thing gets 7 points, this, and it's like, obviously it's a bit of a clumsy way of converting kind of subjective judgments into something that's attempting to be objective, but it can be very, very helpful. And it's how project managers work when they evaluate ideas. It's how teachers mark work, all of those kind of things. And you don't have to do this in such like a structured and nitpicky way, but I think this is what we're always trying to build in our heads. And every time you've got like questions about your project, like, you know, go back, I just see who was it in the chat was talking about yeah, Ponius, and when you were talking about like trying to work out whether that thing in your project is polish or not, or whether it's worth spending time on now or leaving till later. When you're in that situation, okay, you can go, this is where I was coming to with locus of control, right? Some people will just always default for looking for the answer out there. And they'll act like all of the data they need is out there in the world, and there's like some expert in a book or on YouTube who can answer my question about whether this in my game is polish or whether this in my game is polish. But you're the person in the world that has the highest amount of relevant data to be able to answer that question. So what you need isn't like an outside perspective. It can be sometimes, but usually what you need is like a decision-making process for deciding, like in this case, what is polish in my game, what is more important to do earlier on, and what can be left to the end. And that's like something you need to do internal to yourself, because if you have that kind of external locus of control where you think the answer is always out there, you're always going to be going out there, and it's going to slow you down so much. And if you've determined, if you kind of take the responsibility on more yourself to decide, well, you know, I'm not going to get everything right, but I'm going to make some top level decisions about my game and what matters in my game. And then that's going to make it much easier for me to make much quicker decisions about the smaller things in my game based on those bigger decisions I've already made. And I'm going to take responsibility for that because I'm the game designer and this is my project. And then when I do need that kind of middle ground stuff that's not, you know, some expert opinion out there, and it's not like my own, what I want to do with the game or my own experience of playing it, then I know that I need to playtest because I need this other type of data, which is like, hey, fan of this type of game, come and play this game and tell me about it. But the more you take responsibility and have more of an internal locus of control about it, where you're like, it's my responsibility to answer these questions. And if I can't answer these questions, it's my responsibility to like develop ways of gathering the data, or maybe not gathering the data, maybe building a rubric so that you can take all of the available data about like, what should I do, and like properly judge it. Then that's great. That's kind of what you should be aiming for. And just to like give you a practical example before we end. So just to give you an example, I do this all the time to justify ideas for myself, right? And this is my backlog of stuff for Golem Gourmet, which is still called Dirt World spreadsheets. But like here, I've got a thing called Pillars Supported, where all of the ideas, they sort of tell me what they contribute to in the game, right? Make doors change sprite when inaccessible. What does that do? Well, it helps the UX and the visual communication of the game. It allows people to understand what is mechanically happening through the graphics of the game. So it gets I'm not going all the way through what my old project manager did and actually giving a score, but I could, and I might do if it was a larger team project. But I'm at least going, this has some value based on it meeting this criteria. That's what design pillars are for, right? And then I can look at this and I can say, okay, create pickups for ink. I mean, this is also out of date. This is from like a version of the game from 4 months ago. But I do that. I make documentation to help me think. And then I often don't come back to it because I did the process of thinking when I was making the documentation. The documentation is not there as a reference guide of like what to do every day for the next year. It's writing the documentation is a process of thinking with like a extra bit of RAM on the side of my brain. Create pickups for ink. Okay, that adds to the economy of the game, and it adds a challenge to the game, so it's like doubly good because it supports 2 game pillars. And then if I go like the more recent stuff over here, if I go here, this is like my list of my deck of cards in the game. You don't need to know anything about the game to understand deck builders have decks of cards. But over here, I've made a thing like, what is the early game function of this card versus what is the mid to late game function of this card? So I can start to think about like what, I guess to bring it back to what we're talking about, I'm trying to build a rubric so that I understand what is a good idea in the context of my project, right? And no one else is going to tell me that. Sometimes they might feed into that with data from playtesting or just observing it and leaving comments and stuff like that. They're going to give me further data, but I still need to process that data. And the data isn't so-and-so thinks I should do this. It's like so-and-so needs the game to be more like this, and they like this and they don't like this. Okay, that's data. I'll feed that into my decision-making process, but I still need to make the decisions and I still need to have the process. So, yeah, I don't know. I probably kind of, I think the more you do this kind of stuff on paper, it's very easy to get into the trap of like doing documentation because you're doing professional role play and you're like doing documentation to avoid doing the implementation because you think, well, if I plan it out really well, then it won't go wrong. And that's kind of where a lot of hobbyists get stuck with GDDs and stuff. Like you don't need a GDD before you've started building a game. But what I do tend to do is make something like this so that I can kind of build this sort of rubric, right, for what is a good idea in my game. So I might not ever refer back to this again, but the fact that I've built this and I've thought about, okay, when I add a new room, when I add a new card to my deck, I need to think about why does it exist there and how does the function of it change from the start of the game to the end of the game? Because this is the type of game that I want people to play hundreds of runs of. So I'm thinking about that as one of my top level game design concerns. Is like, how is this useful to a new player and how might it be useful in a different way to someone that's played the game 1,000 times? And the building of that particular spreadsheet isn't so that I can meticulously have this spreadsheet open when I make my game and refer to it constantly. It's to help me take all of this and sort of like subliminate it in my head so that when I'm just building random crap in the game engine, all of this kind of thinking that's gone into this spreadsheet has become part of the kind of gestalt of my approach to building the game, right? So I would say, you know, if you're in that place that someone described earlier of like trying to work out what in your game is polished or not, I think these kind of processes can be very helpful because what you're really identifying there is you need your own, I know I'm repeating myself now, but you need your own internal definitions of things like what in this game is core to the experience and what is periphery, you know, what needs to be polished and worked to like a high degree of quality early on because it's so core to the experience that we can't properly judge the game or whether it should be completed without it. And I think what a lot of us are dealing with is like trying to build up the confidence to make those judgments ourselves. And that doesn't mean you don't ever get any playtesting, and it doesn't mean you don't talk to people about your ideas, and it doesn't mean you don't show your ideas to people. But you have to sort of take responsibility for the fact that it's your game, and whatever data you get relating to these decisions about what's polish, what should I make first, you know, how big should my game be, all of these things, they need to be made by you through some sort of process, and anything anyone else can tell you is just data that feeds into that process. So like other people's definitions of like what is or isn't polish in a game are just not relevant to the game that you're making, because, you know, the only rule of thumb I can think of in relation to that stuff is things that the player is doing constantly every minute of the game should be polished in a prototype. I think that's the approach I would take to that. If it's something as simple as you've made a tycoon game, the buttons should click in properly and make a sound effect when you do stuff. If it's a shooting game, then the shooting should feel close to finished when people are playtesting it. Well, not close to finished, but there shouldn't be anything missing from it. I do iterative polish, so I put a sound effect in as soon as the game needs one, and I don't really worry about how good the sound effect is. I'll open Audacity and make it with my mouth, like put it in the game, just me going or something like that, so that there's a thing in place that can be improved. And I do that with everything. I do it with art assets. I do it with code. And again, if you're still learning how to do all of these things, it's probably better to do that because it makes you faster at the workflows. And if you're not in a position where you're going, oh, in a month's time, I'm going to, give someone else £1,000 to make all the sound effects in my game, then you probably need to be doing things that way anyway. But yeah. Okay, so just going to have one last look through the chat and then I'm going to log off for the day and do some dad stuff and making some food. Funny thought, did Van Gogh, Monet, or Picasso write artist equivalents of GDDs? No, but they sketched, and like painters are very rarely famous for their sketches, right? But everything has an equivalent of sketching. Jokester, I think you're right there as well. Like the need to plan something and like write it down is going to be the complexity of it and how much it touches other things, right? Because sometimes you're just like quickly boshing the thing in to see if it works, and then it's like, okay, that works. Now I need to like take it back out and abstract it into something that can be used elsewhere. I've done a lot of that recently. Like, just my game had like 8 mobs in, and they were all unique code. And only this week I've gotten into a state of like trying to make that reusable in some sort of way. Hot Worlds, I love the cash register parry sound. That's great. Anna, so I haven't decided on the food yet. Right, thanks for joining me today. I know we went on for a bit of a waffle at the end, but hopefully people found it useful. I hope I wasn't ranting too much, but I do feel like this is one of those things that people need the kind of Shia LaBeouf green screen pep talk about. We've all decided to do this thing. Let's just kind of be realistic about what that means in terms of like our level of responsibility to ourselves and our projects, and how the fact, like, where the ratio sits of like how much of the kind of information about what we should do is out there versus how much of it is like in ourselves and in our projects. And I think the ratio is much more on that side of things most of the time. It's just people love giving you the answer is out there, and there's one answer type responses because they're easier to give, and they're easier to sell to people as well. So, but I'm not going to get on that high horse today. Have a lovely rest of your Wednesday or whatever day it is, wherever you are.